All right, Matthew, welcome to episode 64 of the Performance Advantage podcast, where we bring sports science to the people with myself, Dr. Will O'Connor, and Dr. Matt Miller, sports scientist. This week on the show, we have Mike Rudling from Radix Nutrition, a freeze-dried nutrition company based in New Zealand that looks to solve all nutrition issues that we have as athletes. So super excited to have him on. Amazing guy, amazing history in sports and as pro cyclist and everything. So that's a good one. And then quick catch up, but also make sure you check out our course, the Performance Advantage Podcast Masterclass 6-part course that covers pretty much all the fundamentals of sports science applied to performance. So check that out on the Performance Advantage podcast website. And as always, shout out to our sponsors, EnduranceTrainingHub.com and Smart MTB Training, online self-coaching software to help you out. Now, Matt and I are doing live weekly webinars on there, just 30 minutes long, bit of a background into, the application of sports science to your training. Check it out.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this webinar tonight. Tonight we're doing how to use your device. So that's one of the things that we cover. And this is for members only. So members of Smart MTB Training and members of Endurance Training Hub get access to a private link and we talk to them, right? So all the people that come on to the webinars have the opportunity to interact with us and ask questions afterwards. And then for people that can't make it, we put the video within Smart MTB Training and Endurance Training Hub so that they have access to that later.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of more practical stuff with presentation based, like how-tos and stuff that we're working on. A lot of feedback from the members on like what they need to know. So like tonight, for example, we're doing how to use your device, because Matt and I forever see people like just set with the default and terms like lap power, lap distance, lap time, average, 3-second average, smoothing, like
there's a lot of options.
Auto laps,
right?
There's a lot, yeah, and just how to change all that and how to best utilize your device for performance. So there's lots of things like that. Just last week was interval training, work to rest ratios, how to apply interval training to your training, how to appropriately execute interval sessions. So it's a lot of that practical application of sports science directly to your training, and bit of Q&A afterwards, which is always a bit of fun.
Yeah, and that can go alongside and enhance the training plans that you get for free as members of those platforms. So
that's right. So Matt, besides preparing for tonight's webinar, what else you been up to?
Had a pretty quiet weekend. It was my partner's birthday, so we went out to her favorite city and did, what people do on birthdays. And, hiking and cruising around, eating lots of good food, those kind of things. But I was up in Rotorua when we did our last podcast, and I was pretty pumped to get out for some more riding afterwards. And you know how, I'm really into innovations, especially in cycling, because we can measure lots of things, and there's all electronics that we can do, working on brake ace so that we can measure and understand our braking. And that, technology has come a long way, but when I was riding, I got, my first flat ever in Rotorua. And I was just, as I was walking out of the forest, I was just so annoyed. I was like, why are we still dealing with pneumatic tires where a failure can come because a stick, and this is what happened in my case, a stick hit my valve and broke my valve. Why are we still dealing with these kind of problems in cycling? It should not be a thing. So I thought about that during my hour walk to my car in the rain.
And what did you come up with?
Well, probably lots of reasons. But to do a pneumatic style tire is pretty easy and adjustable. You just change the pressure. And there are solid tires out there that I've seen going to the various trade shows, but mostly for road cycling. But you probably wouldn't want to ride super fast with a solid, I don't know. I don't even know what they're made out of. Maybe rubber, but a solid tire in the forest of Rotorua. I think it would really dampen your experience, pun intended. But yeah, like I don't know what the answer is. Are we going to spend $1,000 for wheels that come with tires that will never get a flat? I don't know. Maybe that might be a good thing to spend our money on, maybe. So what's been going on with you, Will?
Well, I won't get into it too much because me and Mike talk about it. He was a big keto guy, but really ketosis has been first and foremost in my world at the moment. And I did a 10K running race. Now, like, I did 37 minutes and people were like, oh, that's all right. I was aiming for 33 minutes. The worst. I don't know if you saw my decline in pacing. It was the worst pacing. If we just looked at the data on Strava or Training Peaks or whatever, but pretty much I was hoping I could last the distance, knowing that I probably couldn't, but it wouldn't be like atrocious. But I went from just over 3 minutes per K to just over 4 minutes per K from the decline from the first to the 10th kilometer. Now, at just over 4 minutes per K, I can do that comfortably for hours. Like, I did, about the same average pace for my 50K trail race as I finished for my 10K road race. And so, in my YouTube video, kind of I get into like the science of that, like why that happened, but pretty much, it was...
Was it pacing or nutrition?
Those races? Well, like, I got called out on that on Instagram a little bit, and my pacing was slightly too fast, which can be a major over like 30 minutes, but the decline was drastic. Like, normally if I started a 3:12 first kilometer and I needed a 3:18, goal was around a 3:18, 3:20. So kind of like, not out of this world. And then my second kilometer was 3:16, where I tried to slow down a little bit, and then I'm 2 seconds per K off. So definitely too fast, but also not outrageously quick either. I've done something like that before and slowed and still done, around 33, 34 minutes. I did that during lockdown in my time trial, went out a bit hard, but nothing like the minute slowdown I suffered in this race. And I was so close to pulling out. The only thing that really kept me going, was one, that the distance isn't outrageous, like a bit over half an hour, but also like the science, like, oh, this would be really interesting to see, like, maybe I'll come out of this, but just absolutely suffering, just trying not to get run down by people I would like normally beat any day.
Yeah, that's hard to deal with, but like, you need to keep into perspective like what you're doing. But also, I'm kind of just wondering, like, maybe you're just faster when you're eating a bunch of junk food all the time. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying to me.
I mean,
right?
Yeah, if we can take that data, like, and for sure, like, it's not a performance-based diet, like, in terms of, is like trying to do 30 minutes an hour, kind of anything. Like, you need carbs. We've done multiple episodes, and I mentioned in many other facets of like social media or my life as a sports scientist, and one that did, I did my PhD on this whole topic. Like, there's nothing out there to suggest that you can perform optimally without carbs. Like, from bloody 50 hours to like 1 hour, it's just not going to be possible. And but yeah, like, Mike's from Radix is looking to like solve a lot of those issues for people to like not need the knowledge base like that you or I have, in terms of not just necessarily the knowledge. A lot of people can go out and read like a textbook or something to figure out nutrition or metabolism, biochemistry, but then understanding like those practical applications, going through it, trying to figure it all out. Mike and his company Radix Nutrition are looking to like solve that issue for people, and like it's just a great chat, so we might as well get him on, and get into it. All right, Mike, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. It's a great pleasure. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's cool. So before we get into like Radix and that whole world, I guess like we want to find out about you, like being the co-founder of the company, like because I know you rode, was it Pro Continental?
Yeah, I just reached that level briefly. Yeah. more to say on that, but yeah.
Yeah, and so where was that? Because you don't sound like you're from New Zealand.
So no, I grew up in the UK, and I guess I could give you a briefer history on my sort of athletic background and how I ended up in cycling, if you like.
Yeah, I think that'd be good because I don't think it's every day that someone wakes up and decides to start a nutrition company. I think you need this to have a unique background for that to happen. So we want to kind of dig into it and find out.
I was a swimmer first, so I started swimming when I was about 4, I think, and I got into squad training about, I don't know, beginnings of sort of 5, 6. And I had a really good stint in swimming. I swam through to when I was about 15.
So are we talking like, you know, the 5:30, 6 a.m. mornings,
Yeah,
4:30, 5 p.m. in the evenings? Like,
so I grew up on a little island just off the south coast of the UK called the Isle of Wight. And I started swimming there. I went to school on the island. It's quite a big island. It's 140,000 people, and it's only a K and a half from mainland UK, so it's basically the UK.
Did you swim to school? This is kind of what I'm imagining here. You swimming to school every day.
I swam that. I didn't swim to school once, but I did swim that stretch of water once called the Solent. That was pretty cool. I should have done it more. So,
just every day commuting to school. Like,
well, yeah, you'd be like the Ethiopians and Kenyans, like running to school and then becoming great runners.
It would have been a big time saver. Yeah, no, I just wasted all that time sitting on a ferry. But yeah, no, so I started swimming with local clubs there and was really fortunate to get really fantastic coach and fall into a really great community there. That the thing that really started to teach me as a kid was how to practice well, which I think I'm really grateful for. I think there's so many sports where people just look at it as training and the practice element as a skill in itself isn't really appreciated. There's I had a coach called Trevor Collins who sort of raised me in my career in that sense, and also my father Paul always he was an Olympic athlete or just below an Olympic athlete in fin sailing or international dinghy sailing. And I was sort of brought up in an environment that the quality of training, the quality of your practice, being incredibly aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's important, how to improve, was instilled in me from a very young age. And I guess fortunate that I really enjoyed that. And I think swimming gave me a really good platform. I mean, swimming is as technically complex as you want to make it. You see everything from fast swimmers that are pretty bad technicians through to absolutely incredible technicians in the pool that with incredible stroke quality and technique, and I really appreciate that. So I was ultimately, like I think I was 12, I moved to a boarding school called Millfield in the southwest of the UK, which is like a sports academy, and they've got I think they'd have the best swim club in the country. They've got a 50-meter pool.
Is that why they took you there? Because you were like already starting to be an accomplished swimmer?
Yeah, and it just it was my father really was always he has a mind. You constantly push everything to get better, to go further, to see how you can improve. And There's some obvious limitations, in any environment that you typically find yourself in. Maybe it's hard to go from the school that you need to go to training once a day, and there's a lot of admin and travel involved. And there were some really great coaches and facilities available at this school, but also, you can live. I used to live 100 meters away from my swimming pool, so I'd wake up at, I don't know when I used to wake up, like 20 past 5, 5:30, pull on a tracksuit, and seconds later you're at the pool getting changed, and it just removes some of those barriers that get in the way of what you're trying to achieve there. But
You probably don't need like many barriers, like when you have to wake up that early to go swimming. I'm always impressed by swimmers, like how, I don't know, why do swimmers always go so early?
Yeah,
Just
I
because?
think if you have to fit 2 sessions in a day, it gets quite hard. I mean, two swim sessions, and often with a good swimmer, you have a land session in there as well, and it gets quite hard to space your workouts far enough apart that it's not just one continuous blend of training throughout the day. And then obviously, as a school kid or a student, you've got to get it around your other commitments. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's an interesting one with swimming. Maybe something I learned from cycling. I'm completely out of touch with swimming now, but it seems to be really focused on volume. It's not
Yeah, even like, if you considered any other kind of sport, endurance-based sport, where you have an effort of 1 minute to 2 minutes, and you're going to train like 20 plus hours of repetitive swimming, with very little targeted application of like sprints or something. Even like in the squad I was in, we had the 50-meter swimmers and the 100-meter swimmers, which is all under a minute, doing like the same 5K 1.5 hour session that we were doing.
Yeah.
Like every day.
It never made sense to me. And I was pretty fortunate when I just quickly touch on it, we can get to it later, but I found that same mindset in cycling when I moved into that. It's just a heavy tradition and enormous base mileage. But when I was a swimmer, I was really fortunate. When I was, I think, 10 or 11, I started going to a swim camp for a couple of weeks a year in New Mexico with an Olympian called Tom Jager, who at that time was the fastest 50-meter swimmer in history. I don't know how many Olympic gold medals he'd won, but he was like the famous anchor man in the men's 4x100 relay, and he was a legend. And he really taught me, reinforced it. He was absolutely fanatical about the quality of practice. So always making sure every minute, every meter was as accountable and as on purpose as possible. But he also mentioned the same thing. So he was famous for his technique. So he came from a distance swimming background, which he believed forces you to have a pretty efficient stroke technique. But then he was actually turned out when he was sort of 15 that he was a sprinter. But he thought that technique was hugely important. And I think he, in his own Olympic training, took a lot of that volume out and just really focused on the explosive and the power side. And the only distance work he did was entirely drills focused, just for stroke technique. But yeah, I've always found that a bit weird. Swimming, you'd have the sprinters do 3-4 hours a day in the pool.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make a lot of sense. I wouldn't. It must have changed since now, but I guess at the basic level, you've just got a group of swimmers and a coach, and they can only handle so many different types of sessions at once. But that specificity is a big deal, I think. But yeah, so I was a swimmer until I was 15, I think. I went to Millfield for that, which was a great experience. I was doing maybe sort of 7 to 9 sessions a week in the pool, and a couple of land work sessions, and I was a really good environment for that. And I ended up dropping out swimming. I just did freestyle. I decided nothing else was of interest to me, and which I regret in hindsight. I should have kept the other strokes going, but I didn't do much fly. And one week, our coach Doug put a massive fly set into our week, which ended my swim career. I got 2 chronic rotator cuff injuries. It was like a 4K fly set,
Far out.
and my shoulders hadn't done that ever before, never again. But I actually I was still on a swimmer's timetable, so I used to turn up and just do the sessions kick. So I don't know how many Ks a week that would have been kicking, but yeah, that was still the same sort of 7 to 8, 9 sessions a week kicking. I was a really good kicker going into that, and I was even better coming out the other end of it. But
So what is I'm assuming you couldn't use your arms, right? So I'm just imagining you just like in the
just
water kicking.
I just couldn't rehab it. The physio I went to, I don't know if the exercises weren't quite right, but every time I tried to reintroduce movement back through the top of my rotator cuff, it would just flare up, and once it came up, it was there for 2 or 3 months. So yeah, I was actually in hindsight really grateful for the opportunity. I had this bizarre thing where I was doing all these sessions kick, so you turn up either with or without fins and do 5 to 6K in the pool kicking. I ended up with a couple of teachers at school doing indoor rowing, and rowing was actually okay because the arm movement was a different type. And then indoor rowing I ended up going to the nationals for that. It's this kind of bizarre sport that I stumbled into. It's massively competitive. You've got rowers in there, you've got the fitness community in there, and I didn't know it existed. But back at home where I grew up on the Isle of Wight, we had this chap, Roger Prowse, who was a multiple age group world champion in indoor row. He just held 50, 60, 70-year-old age bracket. I don't know. He might have won it like 15 times. So 2K, 5K, 10K. And I got to training with him. But yeah, that was throughout that shoulder injury period, sort of 15-year-old, did nationals in the UK for that. And then I went to European champs for that. I think I was top 10 or top 13 in both of those, which was fun. And then I stumbled into cycling as a 15, 16-year-old, and I just loved that. Just the chance to be outside and the variation it brings. It's a really dynamic sport. There's so many different ways that you can apply your mind to cycling. And I got into road with a real interest in time trial for that when I was about 15 or maybe 16. And
So you're coming from like swimming where your favorite part is the technique and you're really good at the technique, and then you get into time trialing, which is
technique,
pretty much just about the engine, isn't it?
Yeah, it's horrendously painful. But I was a distance swimmer. My best event in swimming was 1500, but my favorite event was 50. And I always used to be jealous of the sprinters. Like it's all over and done with in sort of 20, 25 seconds. And mine was like 15, 16 minutes of pain. But when I left swimming after, I think I did it for about 11 years. I went to road racing and then time trialing, which in the UK is typically over 2 distances. We'd have 10 or 25 miles, which I think is 16 and 40K, or just under 40K. And yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was a really strong community of that back home on the Isle of Wight. And then when I was at Millfield, there was one teacher that absolutely loved cycling, and I was the first cyclist at the school, which was really interesting. So I used to go out training with this guy, Mick Day, the teacher, which was really fantastic. And I think I was the first student there that had ever had to ask for permission to go off and be a cyclist, which looking back on it would have been a nightmare for health and safety. But I just got clearance to leave the school premises at a certain time, and as long as I was back before dinner, it was all good. Didn't have to tell anyone where I went, where I was going. I can't believe they let me do that, but I since see that they've got a whole cycling team there now, which is great, but maybe a bit ahead of my time. But I sort of fell into that. Absolutely loved it. Got surrounded by some really great older riders. ended up being fortunate to get onto the British Cycling Development Programme at a sort of grassroots level, which gave me a chance to do even more of it. And then in the UK, at the end of your school career, you've got the last 2 years which prepare you for university, which is lower sixth and upper sixth. And I chose the subjects that I thought would be most interesting to me. I chose biology, psychology, and then physical education. But I got through lower sixth. I was really enjoying cycling, and I just decided that I didn't want to go to university, and that I wanted to drop out and to pursue that full time. So discussed it with my family, and decided that was okay. In the basis that you can always go back to university, but I didn't want to go through that if I wasn't really clear why I was going to go there. So I went and got some tests, some lab tests done at Exeter University in the UK, and then another one with a coach of mine, Ken Matheson, who was an ex-Team GB manager, and decided that it was promising. And off I went, dropped out of school and decided to pursue road cycling full time. But it was a hell of a career. I did that for like 7 years full time. Yeah. Am I going too fast or not?
Paid?
No,
because I think like one of the, I know some of our listeners, we've got like a few juniors that are in this position of like, what do I do? So like, what was that career pathway of?
Man, I could talk a lot on that.
Well, it's the hardest transition, isn't it? Like going from like, because you're in school and like it doesn't matter. Like you have all day to train, but then you get into the real world, and you need to you're like, okay, I'm trying to make this my job.
Yeah.
You eventually need to get to that point, and that's the hardest part.
I think looking at, if you look at all young athletes, because that's where the elite athletes come from, right? It's a real time dependent, age dependent thing. I think most, if you go from juniors or under 23, I fail to appreciate how hard and fast that transition needs to be made. I thought I did. I thought I was aware of it, but you've really got like 1 or 2 years to get through that transitory phase between deciding that you want to go from an amateur to a pro and actually having to show promise as a pro in order to get picked up by a team. And like, you can definitely still do it outside of that. But I see a lot of young athletes fall into the whole sort of lifestyle trap, and they're hanging out and they're doing a bit of training and they're exploring other hobbies, and just don't do that. Like, you've got 2 years to absolutely specialize and make as much progress in your sport as possible to transition through to the point where you have a paying career.
So where do you see that kind of transition being the most important, from like the time you're out of juniors, like those 2 years, first 2 years under 23 kind of thing? I
wouldn't waste any of it. I think in cycling, juniors is a huge deal. I never raced very well was my issue. I was always really interested in the science and the technology and the structure and the practices, everything it took to get really high level of performance out. But I actually never really did very well on race day. I did really well in lab tests, which was great. I think I did a test once at Exeter Uni with my coach, who was the ex-GB team manager, and then a couple of physiologists down there. I can't remember what my numbers were, but they thought they were the biggest numbers that a junior had ever done in the UK. And they thought if anyone had done higher than that they'd probably be aware of it. And I didn't capitalize on that in results. So I spent too much time focused on developing myself as an athlete in terms of metrics, and less in terms of getting results on the board. But I think racing a lot in junior, looking back at it, the guys that I was racing with, and the guys there that have gone on to be either Olympians or on the pro tour, they were really standouts at the junior level. I mean, they were just cleaning up at all of the junior circuits in the UK, and then in Europe, a lot of them went over to Belgium, where there's obviously a huge junior program. But I think I would have pushed a lot harder on racing there to really learn the craft and learn how to perform, because it's so much of it in road racing especially is not about how good an athlete you are, it's how well you can get through a race tactically.
It's about saving as much energy as possible, isn't it?
Yeah,
And,
it really is.
hiding.
And being efficient. Yeah. And, certainly when you look at sprinters, I mean, that's the name of the game. But it all comes from really aggressive junior racing on the road, on the track, on circuits, as a lot of it was done then. But I got a little bit unlucky. I was doing pretty well. First year junior, I was doing well, and then I crashed and broke a collarbone, which set me back. But yeah, I don't know. I think I failed at that point to really appreciate the career building element of it and how fast you should really try and do that. And the faster I think people can move through that, the faster they get to the bit where it's actually really fun. The bigger the team that you're on, the bigger the races that you're going to, especially in cycling, it's a complete game changer, because at a domestic level, you're doing circuit races out on roads, they're often not closed. You turn up to a town hall or a village hall or a shed somewhere and get changed. And like when you get to a big race and there's proper team buses and, it's a point to point race with rolling roadblocks and stuff, like that's way more fun. Like you just want to get there as fast as you can. But yeah,
I'm thinking about Matt when we did that interview with Robert Stannard, who's I think he's just turned 21. He's signed with Mitchelton Scott straight out of juniors, and like his single-minded focus was like it blew me away. Like I'd already, because his dad was our supervisor, so always around him and their family. But then talking to him and just like he'll spend the whole day like figuring out how to best concentrate on executing his session, and we have dealt with, like I've dealt with junior triathlon academy and stuff, and you can see these people who are like, this is fun, I'm really good at a sport and I get to go away to a world champs and stuff, and other people who are like, this is the start list, this is who's on the start list, this is strengths and weaknesses, this is my gap to those, this is probably where I have the potential to get, and like at a junior level, because of the rate of development and all this other stuff, someone can just not necessarily fall into like the top 10, but they can get there, and then you can have maybe someone like you who can overanalyze something and not actually perform. And it's about trying to, getting that balance, especially nowadays when you have in cycling where everyone goes, what can you hold? What power? What's your power? And you go, okay, well, I better focus on getting 2 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute, or 20, whatever. And they forget maybe like for a time trial, what's the max speed you can hold for the distance that's going to get you over the line in the shortest amount of time? As opposed to just like, oh yeah, I held this much power.
Time trialing was a really interesting one I found, because especially when I was starting out, SRM were the only power meter around, and in time trialing it was really interesting. I never really got an answer on this, but it was really interesting. People fell into there's that mindset where you just get to your FTP and you just perform as close to that as you can for the steadiest effort possible. And when I started to get around better riders, you could see them really ride the course as fast as possible, and it was less about what their average power was and more just straight on course speed and time, which sounds really obvious when you see it. But at most time trials, you just see people staring at their heart rate or staring at their power meter. And it was really interesting getting around better riders, seeing how aggressively they would ride a course just to hold their average speed as high as possible. And at the end of the day, that's what gives you the fastest time over the line.
That's a race, right? Like it's covering the distance in the shortest time possible. And I deal with this because I think training with power it's the only way to train, but looking at your power isn't the only way to get fast, and having a high average power isn't always the best way to be fast. And you definitely have to like race to the course, especially, because we're not just on Zwift with no one to draft off of, where having the highest average power output or relative power output is going to win. Like even on a time trial course, there's undulating terrain, and due to like how aerodynamics works, and like the faster you go, the more drag you get, the fewer benefits you have for putting out higher power when you're going really fast. You really have to work to the terrain. It's really like, it's not just fitness. It's definitely more like fitness and chess.
Yeah, I time trialing I always found was really interesting. I always had a good FTP. Obviously not as good as I would have liked, but it's just so much left to actually how fast you can ride a course. And I think I always fail to appreciate that. Like, it's so easy to fixate on the number in front of you on a screen. And I was absolutely amazed. I remember when prepping for the time trial nationals once, I got to shadow Alex Dowsett as he was wrecking the course for Team Sky, and I was sitting in the back of his team car, and we were there like a month out from the race, and he was not doing an even effort at all. And we got to this, it was quite a climb, like a drag that might have gone on for like 45, 60 seconds. And he maintained his average. He maintained his speed up that climb. So as he transitioned from flat to the climb, he was seated and maintaining the same speed. And I didn't get to see his power numbers. But it's so hard to follow advice from someone also saying that when you get to a climb, your speed's going to drop. You just need to maintain your power. But Dowsett, he just smacked into it, held his speed, got over the top, and rested on the descent, and then kept into it. And I then went back out and did my own course recce doing that, and it was like 10 or 15 seconds there. And 5 minutes after the start of that effort, you felt the same. You're just 20 seconds further up the road, by the time you've recovered and really used the course well. But yeah, it's really an art. And I don't know the best way through that, but I don't know, going back to the original question, I think the best thing is on that is just to focus on the results, and then just get surrounded by the best people possible as soon as you can, and always to be around people that know more than you do, and who are further on with their career in terms of actually getting results than you are, and just try and pick up all of these great habits. And I was really fortunate to do that, and a lot of my childhood growing up in swimming, I was always around better people, and then I was always pushed to do that by my father Paul, but the same in cycling. And I see that so often as a trap. You see a bunch of really talented athletes, maybe they're juniors, maybe they're under 23s, and you see them all hanging out with each other at a cafe, and or for dinner or whatever. And I did all of that, and I look back at it with a little bit of regret, because the best guys I saw, when they're working, they work really hard and they're really focused, and when they're relaxing, they're somewhere completely else, doing, completely switched off. But they're always around people that can help them stretch and grow and develop that better mindset. And I wish I'd pushed a little bit harder on that, but it's an interesting one. The traps are always there to be fallen into,
Yeah, like I find it really interesting too, because if traps in your progression as an athlete aren't just there for amateurs and beginners and people climbing the ladder, I think there are plenty of traps for people at the very top. And that's kind of one of them, is kind of, you get surrounded by people that are like pretty good. And then you think, well, athletes always have this idea that this person's slightly better than them, so I'm going to do what they do and I'll be slightly as good as them. But you kind of miss the point when people around you are doing things wrong, if you're not constantly surrounding yourself with people that are better.
I think this kind of goes back for me to that element of just being really aware of where you're trying to go to, really in tune with what's currently happening, and just always checking your activities and your mindset against where you want to be. It is really easy to fall into a sort of familiar routine, you know, it's really difficult to always always try and get amongst a community where you're the slowest in the bunch or you're the worst in the room, but it kind of, I think that's one of the main skill sets that you need to develop if you want to, you know, go a long way. There's a lot to learn, and especially when you look at an athlete in the junior and under 23 bracket, and maybe even an athletic career as a whole, you don't have very long to put all of this together. So you just don't want to fall into that sort of trap of familiarity. And I guess I was really lucky. I've always been incredibly curious, and I've always been like obsessively driven about moving forwards, which bugs the hell out of some of the people I've worked around and colleagues, because like we always approach a problem like, how do you make something several times better? Like, how do you make something a minimum 50% more efficient? Because no matter if you're looking at a training program or your routines or, you know, micro macro planning or issues as we have it now with technology and manufacturing and product development, there's so much latitude for thought. There's so much room for improvement. Like, if we ever find ourselves in a situation where we think we can probably make something a few percent better, like, I know for sure that we're wrong. Like that for me has become a warning sign that we're on the wrong line of thinking. Always, like, nothing, you know, if you look at a sort of rate of return curve or improvement and you start to get towards the end of that S where you're really in the diminishing returns, like I've really learned to acknowledge that as a warning sign that we need to step back and have a rethink and see if there's a more efficient path that we can be on. But it's just, it's one of the biggest things I've learned from sport, because you just have that ability to relentlessly apply that, and, you know, gain from all the results. It's just a really fun process. But I think one of my takeouts from my sports career was that mindset, and you know, just being really fortunate to be a part of you know, communities that were really driving hard to getting a goal. And, you know, we've taken all of that into Radix now, which has been really fun. But
yeah, I see so many parallels between like being an athlete and pushing as hard as you possibly can to get the most out of yourself, and then being an entrepreneur as well.
yeah,
So like,
Yeah,
there's so many skills.
Like failure, that's what I see a lot. Like, athletes fail every single time, pretty much. You know, like, one person wins and one team wins. So whether you're a team sports or whatever, like, you're forever, good or bad, measuring up to something. If it's a time trial, a weekly time trial, if it's, you know, your heart rate based session, is it you're like waking up to make sure you go for that 6 a.m. swim squad. Like, there'll be the days where you don't get up and you failed, and then like the life like, you forgot to eat before, you forgot to take your food, you got sick. Like, there's all these things that you constantly consider in order to improve, and then you don't do, and then you realize that that's okay. And kind of business applies itself, and management as well, like being vulnerable.
It's a pretty hard mindset, and I think especially as an athlete, when you start to really be in the presence of that at a young age, it's so easy to measure yourself and see how you're failing. And it was a big one for me to try and to get in the space where if you're setting ambitious goals, 9 times out of 10 you're going out and you're not meeting it, right? But it's just to try and compartmentalize that into a challenge. So, you know, not really take it to heart as a failure, but why did that not go the way that I wanted? What opportunities do we have to change and adjust for next time? What challenges does it present? And try and really always keep that in a positive sense, because it's a pretty brutal process as an athlete to get up for an early morning swim at 5:30, and by 7 o'clock you feel like you've already failed at your main goal for the day. Like, it's so easy to fall into that trap. But the cool thing is that you just get to simply you know, pivot or adjust your course and try it anew and test something else out. And these are all, you know, from small to big challenges that you can just work your way past. But it's a brutal learning path, but it's a really fun one to get on. And I think sport's probably one of the very best teachers for that.
Definitely. Like, not everyone can deal with all the failures that happen in sport, or we shouldn't say failures, all the learnings that happen in sport. and because there are so many times where you feel like you are let down, and that's
It's
really
just
difficult.
framing.
Yeah.
These are all opportunities that you can identify ways to improve, and it would be worse if you couldn't identify, if you haven't met your goal and you can't identify a way to improve. That would actually be worse. But it's for
Right.
sure painful to when you really really believe in something, you really desperately want it. Yeah, it's a hard path, but it's really fun, and it just depends on how you want to look at it and mindset. And it's definitely one as an athlete. I remember you've constantly got to pick yourself back up and remind yourself that, turn a negative into a positive and just try and find a better way past it. But all of those opportunities are there always. It's just a case of finding that, and I think it brings a lot of creativity to the process. There's a lot of resources out there to learn from, and that's a part of the journey. I think it's a really fun bit of it.
Yeah. So you were you racing elite for 7 years? So you started
No.
cycling at 15, and then you were in it for a long time.
I wish. So I probably started in earnest at like 16. Left school maybe later that year. 17 would have been my first year of doing it full time. And then I went through the junior under 23 ranks. I had good luck and bad luck, and broke collarbones. I got I got overtrained a couple of times. I got Epstein-Barr virus and glandular fever and other things. But it was a heck of a journey. It was super fun, and I think I'd do it all again. But that culminated. The best team I got onto was 2009 Rafa Condor. I got onto what was to be their under 23 development program.
Oh, Rafa. So
Yeah, and I didn't appreciate how cool it was to be amongst that team. There's some really, really good guys there, and I was really fortunate to live and train with Christian House, who went on to be national champion. Tom Southern, who was a really talented rider. Tom, is he DS for Cannondale now? No, or he was Cannondale. I forget what team he's with now. You see, I don't follow the sport as much as I used to, but some really, really good riders. We had Olympians on the team, world champions. We had John Herity as a manager, who's incredibly knowledgeable. But it was an okay year for me. I had some challenges in it, and I didn't get a seat on the team again the year after that. And I got pretty sick at the end of that year. I overtrained, and then I got a really bad stomach virus right on top of that overtraining period. And it was just a sort of double beat down, and I had to take a pretty big rest at the end of that. But
what do you think led to your overtraining?
I did a lot of base miles. I did a lot of really high volume intensity work. So one training session I used to respond really well at, but in hindsight, I was either at the wrong. I'd question it a little bit now, but we called it an endurance ride, but it used to build up. For me, it was 320 watts. I had a heart rate limit of 162 beats a minute. My max heart rate at that time was about 184, if that gives you an idea of where it was in my zone. I used to do sets of 320 watts, 160 heart rate for maybe two hours. I got to about 2.5 hours at that. Yeah, wow. That was at like 19, and I probably weighed about 73 kilos. And that was cool that I could do that. I think it was just pretty wearing. I started to do that around, bigger race calendar with some longer races. I was probably training harder than I needed to with the races that I had going on. And I think one thing I really learned from Tom, which hindsight being a beautiful thing, but just the ability to really switch off and recuperate and recover outside of the sport. Otherwise, you can get into just that all-consuming mindset, where every minute of the day is your mind's on and you're conscious. And I think I was overtraining a little bit, and I wasn't relaxing enough outside of the sport. I just got a little bit burnt out, and then some stomach virus just started going through the community I was in, and I got it, and that was just down and out for a few months after that. But
Yeah, if you're overtrained, it's really difficult to deal with something like that. And those two things that you said, those 2 points, like overtrained and like not disconnecting from cycling. Well, first off, that session sounds absolutely brutal. It's a really good indicator.
I loved that.
Yeah.
That session. That was one of my favorites. Yeah.
It really indicates like how fit you are, right? And that's a great it's great data to have. So like if you know that an athlete can hold 320 watts at 73 kgs for 2 hours, you're like, all right, they're really good. Like that's really impressive. But also to do that regularly, that is extremely.
There's half Ironman race pace.
Well, I didn't. Yeah, there was a lot of training.
Because you must have been averaging, like, if you had a good course, you could probably get in, like, just under 40 k's an hour, or about 40 k's an hour, right?
Yeah, it was kind of fun. It was pretty quick, but yeah, I don't know. I used to love those sessions, but the problem is no one gives you a medal based on that, right? It's cool if you do it in the week, but if you can't repeat that at the weekend where it really counts, that's the issue. But yeah, I don't know. I just I stepped up to a bigger team. The volume of training went right up. Then there's a load of racing. It's easy. I got really stressed out by turning up to a lot of these big races, and Rafa was like the best team in the country at that point. So I felt that there was a lot of pressure on you as a rider to do well, which wasn't fairly there. You know, I should have I wish I could have viewed it and just to turn up, have fun.
That's probably what they wanted from you, wasn't it?
For sure.
As a young rider,
fantastic team, and you see always the best riders, the best athletes have a load of fun at competing. You know, and I don't know. You look outside it to other sports. I mean, if you can turn your competitive game into a true game where you're playing, I think that's where you see the best guys. You know, Roger Federer, when he's at the top of his game, it's beautiful. He's not stressed at all, and he's just enjoying the process. And for me, it was far easier to get into that mindset on a training ride than it is with a number on your back at a big race at the weekend. And yeah, I wish I could have cracked that, but as I said, I was awesome in training. And I less so at races at the weekend, but time trialing was a little bit different because you're just by yourself. But yeah, and anyway, I always loved the training and physiology and nutrition and sort of the performance side of the sport.
So is that kind of when you transition to what you do now with Radix? How do we say it? We should probably get that out.
It's Radix.
Radix.
We asked Stephen.
That's how I pronounce it, but
it means the origin or the impetus or something for the start.
So Radix, as my understanding of it, is for the base of a complex system. So yeah, this is a different side of my character, I guess. So whenever I've gone through things, always strive to get a really simple and actionable solution out the other side of it. And especially being a complete geek, as I am, and like I'm incredibly curious about things. There is so much known about nutrition, and it's so impractical and confusing for anyone to actually apply well. And you have this huge potential that's just not being met for most people. So, you know, the genesis of this was when I used to race and train and what have you. It's really easy to optimize what you do at home. It's really hard to travel with that and take it to a venue somewhere else where you have to perform. And nutrition, I was gluten intolerant, and I was definitely aware that on certain foods, I would definitely perform better on. So like I was really sensitive to sodium. If I had too much sodium, it screwed my heart rate. and I just couldn't get the top end out on my FTP. So just being aware of these little things, and when you're traveling around the UK or other countries, or going for a race, and you've got to go through, I don't know, trains, planes, ferries, motels, hotels, restaurants, cafes, the whole lot. It's really hard to stick with the routines that you perform best on. And I just wanted to find a way or an opportunity to tidy that up for people so that you could really start to dial in and optimize a person's nutritional strategy. And there's so much that is known about nutrition and all of the relevant fields around it that your average person on the street, myself in the form, you've got no hope in hell of actually being able to apply that. I mean, at Radix, the thing was to try and stabilize all of the relevant fields of knowledge and understanding and ingredient quality that would enable us to really engineer an incredibly nutrient dense natural product. But importantly, it's to put all of that in a format that is far more convenient than anything else. So, we need to work on flavor, and we've got a new generation coming out, which is we're getting really positive feedback on flavor. But we can get you a meal designed as per best scientific knowledge within that field, with the best ingredients, literally incredibly high quality ingredients and amazing diversity of these different ingredients. And we can get it to a point where you can make dinner as fast as you can even think about what cafe you'd want to go to, or halfway through you opening the fridge and seeing what's in there, like 10, 20 times faster than anything else. It just should be really simple for people. And that was the thing that frustrated me always, as a geek, when you look into a field and you see like, wow, look at how much is known and look how much this can bring to my performance. But it's actually left with you figuring out how to apply that and being able to apply it into a really limited time slot, and I as an athlete used to spend a huge amount of time preparing food, going out cooking and all that. And it's just, if there's a better way of doing it, it's actually not the main focus of your day, Same with a great coach. Like, there's a lot to be known in coaching. It's a huge field, but as an athlete, your job is to find the best coach and then listen to them and learn from them. Your job isn't to figure it all out yourself. You don't have the time for it. So we had this concept, or I had a concept to try and see how much of that gap between what is known scientifically and what your average person has the time and ability to apply, how much can we really shorten this delta?
So where did that, you're in New Zealand, in Hamilton.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of we're getting the idea of Radix Nutrition. But then, where's that gap? Where's New Zealand?
Oh, how does it fit into it?
Yeah, how'd you get over here?
So I was living and racing in California when I decided to just, I'd reached the end of my cycling career. And by that time, my parents had moved to the north of New Zealand.
Right.
So I moved back home to regroup for a few months and see what was next, and then had this idea. It's pretty cool. Where I really want to get to with Radix, the big piece that doesn't really exist in the world yet is actually truly enabling personalized nutrition. So if you look at what is known about, if you look at where genetics are going, and we've got more and more is being known, which should we want to get to a position where we can actually make personalized products against a person's genetic profile. And also all of their dietary preferences. So the future for us, the piece that we're working on is an ability for someone to come to us, upload their genetic data, and either have that interpreted by us and recommended back to them, or through a practitioner, and then to be able to make a customized product against that. That would be at the top end. And we're working on doing that both for private individuals that, maybe an athlete that's really dialed in on what they're doing and they know what they want, whether that be they're really aware of what macros they want or any micro deficiencies that they may have, or whether it's going through a practitioner. We're in the business of trying to make that as simple and as actionable for people as possible by pulling together all of the underlying structure, hence the name Radix, to end up in the simplest, most holistic, nutrient dense and thorough solution for that person possible. So when you look at the foil bag, and people are like, why foil bag and all the rest of it? These are the only ways in which you can pull together such a diverse and high quality set of ingredients and nutrients. And that is our format for giving it to someone in a way that it's just as simple as possible. Just tear off the top, add water, and in 30 seconds you've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But it's actually really cool. We're working on some stuff that's not really ready to share yet, but just how much more we're able to do for a person's nutrition than they're able to just out in the casual world, just staring at a supermarket aisle. Like, that is so far away from being dialed in.
Matt and I were talking about it before you came on. Like, it's the worst as an athlete. Like, you talk about traveling. We've all traveled, regardless if it's for sport or not. Just sticking to your diet. Yeah. And like, we can have all the best intentions. Our world's not designed for that. Even financially,
even daily,
like, it's just
even daily.
Yeah. And so we were like, I'd never really considered Radix until like I'd started. Kieran was buying them. So, Length New Zealand Triathlon. We did that last episode, mentioned you guys and everything. But, and then he, being an athlete and a dad, was just, I'd see how often he was eating the meals, because it's just such a nightmare to come home. You're like, oh my God, like, I'm wrecked from work and being a dad and training. And now I haven't got the meat out of the freezer. You're like, oh my God. People you can dial it right there. You just pour that hot water in. It's like, why has someone not thought of this before?
Yeah, I mean, people always stress and worry about the 5 or the 10%, and try and optimize that, and they fail to get the 90% right in front of it. Figuring out what supplements you need or really want for performance. You shouldn't need supplements most of the time. Like, if you look at how many meals people eat a week, athletes can be sort of 30 plus meals a week. There's a lot of opportunities there to do the right thing. And yet there's a load of attention from athletes, what race day nutrition do you have? And actually, if you focus on everything else leading up to it, your race day nutrition is a far lesser importance. And, we see people skipping the right, nutrients at breakfast or before training or after training, or failing to get lunch. Scrambling through a really busy day to try and get to that workout that they really want to do with their mates or their training partners after work. It's all of pulling together all of the benefits from the majority of a person's time is where the biggest results come from. It's not from worrying about, the 5% on top, and just a question of fundamentals. And that's where, if we can get the base of a person's diet really on point and optimized, the results are huge. I mean, one of the frustrating things, a lot of our customers that we work with, these athletes, they are actually private customers, so we're not allowed to talk about them. It's not often, if a really successful athlete or performer comes to us, they've already got big sponsors. So we're not going to be able to get let in to talk about how we're helping them or who we're working with. But there is so much to be gained at looking at how much you can move their nutrition on in each and every day. What that person's able to do with the time saved is tremendous. And it used to be the boring side of it, right? I mean, the fundamentals are kind of the most important bit, and it's always the ones that people want to just move past and get onto the...
Yeah, in my head, I'm thinking like, people are like, what wheel depth should I use? 40 mil or 50 mil? And you're like, you're 10 kgs overweight. I think maybe focus on that, or like you missed every single day of training because you were too busy, and you're like, yeah, but I can spend money.
Yeah, and it's scary, you know, when you take that honest view and look over a sort of macro picture, like your whole week or your whole month, you realize that typically people realize they're further away from where they thought they really were. And you know, we've tried to get the price point of our products down so that they're realistically within, you know, $1 or $2 of what someone would have otherwise made themselves. I mean, we can get a 600 calorie meal, 240 grams of vegetable content per meal, which is 3 servings a day. We can get that down to about $13 for a customer, which, you know, when you look at ingredient delivery services, which is not something that we compete with directly, but maybe that's a path that people try to DIY approach to getting their diet on point. We're cheaper than just the ingredients cost before someone's even factored in the time that they've got to spend in preparing it and cooking it. And, you know, we're able to get right into the micronutrient design, which, trust me, you just don't want to bother with yourself. It's like really complicated. There's loads of experts. Most of the experts, you know,
quacks.
It's really hard. And again, I just wanted to come up with a concept that allowed us in the background to work and pull together a really refined, really high quality product, so that you as a customer, as an athlete, whatever you are, you can just focus on driving after your goal. You don't have to worry about getting lost in these details. I mean, it sounds a stupid analogy now, but you know, you don't make your own iPhone, right? And actually, if you look at the amount of complexity that can stand to go into nutrition and physiology and performance and longevity and all these areas, I promise you, it's every bit as complicated. It might not be, the value of it is up to the individual to place on it, but there's a huge amount that can be done there. And I just wanted something that we could take care of all of that and really geek out and just provide the end user with the ultimate simplicity around it. So that's sort of the background and I guess the big picture and what we're working through. And how did Kieran find it? I mean, how much of a benefit was it to him not having to worry about this during the event?
Didn't matter to him because we were cooking his meals, but like
it was really good for us because all we had to do was pull off and heat.
Incredible! It was absolutely like game changing for that whole expedition, and I'm sure you've had other reports likewise. Because there's no like we were so, I don't want to say underprepared. We were just inexperienced in a moving expedition. Like, in order to, we know how to fuel. You know, me being Kieran's coach, nutrition, we talk about it, but like at home, like you said, easy. You know, we just make sure we've been to the supermarket or we go on the way home and then those meals are there. And if that, you know, all those spices, all those like small add-ins that we know we need to take care of to boost calorie intake or anything like that, easy. But then when you are moving up the country, there was no chance we would have, just storage of shared ingredients would have, you know, he would have just ended up eating oats. And
that's a really good point, because what I observed is, you know, when you look at people trying to take control and really do a good job of their diet, it comes back to what you can measure. And typically you tend to end up in a situation, I certainly used to end up in a situation where there's a propensity to end up with a really simple set of foods that you take in. It's what's measurable. So you go to a nutritionist, they tell you how many grams of oats to have in the morning. It's a really easy answer, but what really matters when you start looking at nutrient density and the diversity to bring across all of these different trace nutrients that you need to really perform, you need a really complicated picture. You need all of these different amounts. And, you know, it's really easy for us to design a product with 20, 30, 40 different ingredients in it. It's a nightmare to make that as an individual. Like that is a huge hassle. And there is so much more when we're looking at the microbiome and starting to look at the genetic impact, and you start to see how important these really minute elements are to the person's overall health, you can't account for that in front of a supermarket aisle. Like, you've got no chance at all. When you want to look at a really optimized split of, or really optimized prebiotic composition in your daily or weekly diet, it's really complicated. And we've got guys working on that right now, and it's just as easy to apply as making a cup of tea or coffee. You just tear the top off, add water, and you can just benefit from that. But it's a pretty fascinating area. But look at what Team Sky do as an example. For them to try and do well, they've got many staff members, an entire bus just dedicated to looking after nutrition.
Yeah, well, Matt and I talked about that kind of last episode as well, in terms of like the trip and what we learned. You can see why these teams, whether it's an Olympic team, whether it's a swim team, a hockey team, rugby team, like why they have like 2 personnel for like every player on the field or on the road, like, because it matters. So you can't have someone trying to do your washing, fill your water bottles, and cook your food, like, and do the shopping. Like, it just becomes so overwhelming. So you need all these people to make sure you're kind of like you have what you've put in a bag.
So is this where Radix kind of fills that gap? Like, because that's not possible for everyone, right? It wasn't possible for us.
Even with someone like Team Sky, we can just absolutely smash them out the park. Like, we're able to optimize our systems and our products in a way that you cannot do in that. When you look at a chef type situation and catering and moving internationally, different hotels, different supermarkets, different availability, that model can't compete. You don't know the quality of the ingredients you're buying. It's really hard to get the diversity in there that you need. There's layers of complexity there that we can just simply take care of on the back end. So, we've worked with a lot of organizations where they say that they have that traditional structure. So they'd have a sort of advanced party of support staff that will go across to a hotel. They've maybe booked out a section of the kitchen so that they can prepare their own meals. And I've kind of been a part of that as an athlete. And that a bunch of those people are just scrambling through local supermarkets to see if they can pull together the ingredients that they've put on the menu. There's no thought as to the quality of those ingredients. Where were they grown? What was the soil quality like? How nutrient dense actually are they? You got no idea at all. And we're able to optimize that with the model that we've got. We can look into every tiny detail and gradually just iterate this design until we've got a really sophisticated product. And it's, again, going back to your iPhone analogy, it would be really hard to make your own, but what you ended up with just wouldn't be anywhere near as good, right? I mean, they're 12 generations old at this point, but just quietly working away at refinement. And the supplement industry has that, but that only typically makes up the few percent of a person's overall dietary intake, and it's not the part that you need to get on point if you want to really significantly change what you're doing. And that was just a huge frustration with me as an athlete, going through it. Again, not just nutrition, but in all of these different areas. You can see that there's so much potential out there if you can just get access to the right information, the right tools, the right network, the right coaches. But it's just hard to pull all of that together, and it absolutely doesn't have to be that way when it comes to nutrition. And yeah, we can get to some serious levels of sophistication past that, which we're pretty excited to do. But
so do you think Radix is the future of food?
I think I don't know how much of it will be Radix, but I think
no, but that style, because you're freeze drying.
Yeah, so freeze drying is just a tool that we use, and we want to get to a point where you as a customer won't know that we've done it. right? So it's just, we use freeze drying because it gives us a gentlest way of preserving nutrients. And it also gives us a really simple format for people to take out. I mean, you don't have to use any fridges or freezers. You have a product with a two-year shelf life. We can get that out further than that. We've had athletes travel to the Olympics, and in their hand luggage, they've got a week's worth of food, just like in the bank. If anything gets difficult, if they can't make it, if their schedule slips, if logistics get harder, they just don't have to deviate from their plan. They've got all their food. They've trained and raced with that beforehand. So I think what you'll see as the area is better understood, you'll see the solutions provided just start to stretch further and further beyond the reach of what someone can do individually at home. And the performance advantages that people can see that they can get from that will start to make them default over to that. So, we have a lot of people say like they love cooking, which I always question how true that is. I'm a terrible cook, dangerous.
No one
hate
loves
cooking.
doing the dishes.
No.
People say that, but I think what they mean is that there's 1 or 2 times a week where they really love getting everyone around the table and having a real great social setting.
Yeah, no one's going to like get around the table and open up a couple foil bags together.
I don't think that's going to happen, but like, you pick a weekday where you're really busy and you're going to fall behind on lunch, or you're just going to grab something because something's better than nothing. That's when you fall behind in your health or your wellness or as an athlete. They're the times that whether you like to cook or not start to become irrelevant, and we can just really help you close that performance margin. But I going back to your question, I think when you start looking out at where the medical and health industries are going, I think the future of food belongs to a nutrition company and not this sort of commodity market that you've got at the moment, where people essentially just turn up to a warehouse and just fill up a basket with what takes their eye, ad hoc, applying knowledge that they've picked up from a stack of books and articles. And I think it will shift towards something. There's a lot more clarity.
Well, it's a real industry challenge as well, because if we read whatever nutrition-based magazine, food-based magazine you have, like the back end of that's all funded by whoever what products are trying to sell. You go to an event, and Nature Valley is a big sponsor of cycling endurance sports events, so we probably recognize that name, and they've got the muesli bars in there and stuff, and trying to say that that's going to be anywhere near efficient to fuel you during your day is like, but then you're going to go to the supermarket after you got your fruit and veg, and those are going to be the things you're pulling off. But yeah, I can really see how, like, why wouldn't you just minimize that window into just having what you need readily made and available?
Yeah, and I one thing that really I'm pretty passionate about, when you start looking at the environmental side of food and the societal impact and animal welfare and the rest of it, it's a pretty big picture to pull together. And at this level, we're able to do that. And it's really hard to do that as a private individual, just turning up to a supermarket when we're just by ourselves, and you never really know where that product's come from, what's happened to it, where it's been produced, under what standards. There's so much there, and it's a really complicated picture, and so I think that's something we're going to do really well on, just making sure that every part of what we're doing is done right and optimized well. And we want to be fully transparent with everyone where our ingredients are coming from and to what standards, and we're doing a better job of that at the moment than we communicate outwardly, which we're going to start fixing, just to really tell, how do you define a really outstanding quality ingredient? Where does it come from? How do you make sure that the footprint you leave behind, or your food leaves behind, is really cared for and not causing any undue stress or environmental impact, or it's all as fair as can be? So there's a huge amount of room there to do better around this, and we're really excited to keep putting it together.
Yeah, and like, where can we get your meals and everything?
Yeah.
Like someone's listening to this and like, yeah, that's like exactly what I need, because I think most people definitely have found themselves in a position where they have crappy food choices. Like, are you at the supermarket, service stations?
No, we're not. So we're online. So because you've been to the factory and had a look around, like it's really expensive to make a really high quality product. And so initially we set this model up to be e-commerce because we wanted to retain as much margin as possible so that we could reinvest that back into the technology and product quality. So we're online, and we're just starting to change that in a few areas, going out to some select stores. But no, we're online. We've got next day delivery available nationwide. Takes 1 to 2 days to get to Australia. Yeah, we're just online. Should be super simple. We've got an awesome team that looks after all of our customers, and yeah, it should be really easy. We've got a new website launching in 3 weeks, which will make it even easier again. But yeah, just find us online. So radixnutrition.com.
Yeah, sweet. We'll put the link in the description as well. And yeah, I see you've got keto meals. That's always a super hard one to find on the go. So
Well, you would know that, Will, because you're still going keto, aren't you?
yeah, currently still keto, so I'm pretty actually stoked on that.
How's that been going for you?
Well, good and bad. You know, like it's just because you used to do it, right? I remember talking to you when I came to the head office, and you used to do it pre-season, and so that's pretty much what I'm doing. And I get like diet, as you must, get a lot, is so polarizing in terms of what people are doing, and people love to tell you that they tried something and it didn't work for them, and you shouldn't be doing this and that. And I'm doing it because I really enjoy the science. I love like how I react to different things and all that. And on a day-to-day, I feel amazing. Just mental clarity, just feeling light, free, just really, really good. But then I did a 10K running race on Sunday, and it was definitely top 5 worst races of my life. Like,
just in performance or feel?
Both. Or after the first 3K, so about 9 minutes or so, and I'll ask you how you've been able to handle high intensity training. So in in previous times where I've been doing low carb or keto, I've been able to handle around 20 to 30 minutes, maybe a bit more depending on the intensity and how I've been able to time my nutrition and stay in ketosis. But it really matters on the duration of like adaptation and making sure you have full glycogen. But anyway, that was after that initial window of carbohydrate usage was evaporated. It's just an absolute sufferfest.
Yeah, I bet. I used to use a keto diet about 6 to 8 weeks towards the end of my sort of winter training block, just to try and cut weight. And I've forgotten a lot of how I used to apply it. And I used to apply it a little bit extreme in some instances, but I used to do a lot of long distance, lower intensity, or maybe low to mid intensity in a keto state. I used to do that to try and, I was following some research that Team Sky were using at that time to try and improve cycling efficiency. But I didn't do anything around high intensity. And I always used to find as soon as I reintroduced carbs back into it, my numbers just shot up massively. So I never used to look at it for racing in a keto state. Like that would be really hard. But I did used to use it for training and as a way of trying to get better at sparing glycogen or carbohydrates and then lose weight. And for that, it was really effective. But I will admit, I used to push out a little bit hard. So I used to do sort of maybe 20 to 30 hours a week, lower intensity on that. I used to do do a lot of fasted rides, and then in a keto state. But I never
How
got
much? How much weight would you lose?
I never, only about a kilo a week peak. I used to try and not, I'd rather be like 800 grams a week, I think, from memory, anything past that. And I found that my health started to take too much of an impact. But like for me, I wanted to lose fat in a controlled way as efficiently as possible so I could get back to high intensity training. But I would, truth be told, I mean, I was doing this at sort of 20 years old, 21, doing the best that I could, and it wouldn't have been as well as I wouldn't have been doing it with a fraction of the knowledge that you did, but it made a heck of a difference to those goals. I just found it gave me such a short transition period through weight loss that I could just come out the other side of and get back into higher intensity pre-season training. And then I was always just really careful to cycle my carbs to just have the right amount. I never did well on a diet really high in carbohydrate sources, as was common with a lot of nutrition advice that I used to get. And I always found, typically when you eat a ton of carbohydrates, it tends to push out the parts of your diet that really bring across a lot of the nutrients. So I just used to try and balance that as best as I could. But even there, I'd be filling out food diaries, and it's coming from someone that used to hate homework at school, and it's felt a heck of a lot like homework. And I could just see it wasn't that accurate. And then as soon as you go off piece because you haven't been able to follow your schedule, it's a nightmare in terms of putting in what you did eat and trying to track it. And then I was always really worried if as soon as you start, removing all of that safety margin out and trying to dial your numbers in too tight, I knew that the figures that I had in my diet tracking weren't that accurate anyway, and there's not enough of an advantage, or wasn't as much of an advantage for me there to so close to having a mistake or under fueling, or as I said to you in the past, I had a lot of instances where I overtrained. So I used to eat a lot of food as an athlete. I just used to really carefully control my carbohydrate intake. But yeah, the keto side of it that was back when I was sort of 20 to 23, I guess, and I used it to lose weight. It was fantastic for that. And then I found that my endurance just picked up quite a lot. But when I moved back to using carbohydrates, but I had no issue. I could just wake up without having breakfast and go and do a hard 6-hour bunch ride with people. And had zero issues at all. And I don't know how that is looking back at it now. I don't know how common it is for people to be able to do that. But I know a lot of riders that if they go an hour without energy gels and drinks, they're in a pretty bad place.
We see a lot of those athletes that come to us, don't we, Will? And that's one of the first things that we try and improve with them.
Yeah,
efficiency.
Economy and efficiency, because they have a high carb diet and they train in the gray zone. So it's everything to not promote fat oxidation or just efficiency, economy of movement. That's where I see, like, when you're talking about the genetic testing and stuff, and just the whole knowledge base around, like, kind of one of the reasons I'm doing a keto diet and putting out some videos and content at the moment is just an education resource. People go, oh, okay, like ketosis is a metabolic state that requires a reduction of carbohydrate intake to a point in which there's not enough carbohydrate in your metabolic system to supply all the resources that require it. Now, that is not a specific number. Like, if you're training 30 hours a week, you could be eating 3 grams of per kg per day, and that's far beyond what anyone would consider a keto diet. But you could be in ketosis.
Yeah.
But likewise, someone who doesn't train at all can look at you and go, oh yeah, Mike was doing keto on 150 grams. I saw him have a chocolate bar at the end of his ride. You can have chocolate bar, it's it's within diet, like you're saying about recording your diet. There's so much that comes to like, oh, this is the number, and this number replicates this whole complex metabolic system. And if I don't get my 4-to-1 ratio carbs to protein after my ride within 30 minutes, I now no longer, like, it was pointless having it. And it's like, what about the duration, intensity, like time of day, like when you ate previously? Like, there's so much stuff that comes into it. And you're right that each individual snippet of education is there to tell you to do these things. But then as a holistic, like you said, on the macro level, you stand back and you look at your week, you're like, man, that looks like it looks like a mess. You'd never train like that. You'd never do like 30-minute run and then the high intense, and then do the interval part of the run in the evening. It's just,
and I think that's just quite a mature mindset that a lot of people don't really appreciate early enough on, is that there's often far more performance enhancement between those gaps that people miss in applying well than there is in really worrying or stressing about any one particular part of it. It is a whole cohesive package. Your body doesn't know the days of the week. It's just seeing, stimulus and recovery periods. And I think, a lot of people I've met so many people that will tell you exactly what they're doing with their diet and why. And yet there's no structure to it. And there's a huge gap between what they think they're doing and what they're actually doing. And I think it's just in that simplicity of application piece. And I think also with the keto diet, it looks like there's way more analytical tools available to people now to actually track these things themselves. It's just taking it forwards and putting it into a real simple solution for them. And that's the bit that we're working on with nutrition as well, because what people read in a book, what people will tell you about their diet versus what they go out and actually do, you can just see that there's such a gap. And with the best performers, they don't have that. Then you can see that they've just got enormous complexity. Team Sky, for example, work really hard on those fundamentals, but your average one of us that isn't fortunate enough to have that. But there is a simpler way of getting that.
Yeah, sweet. Well, I think we'll leave it there. That's amazing amount of information to take away. So well, thanks, Mike, for coming on, and we'll definitely be following Radix and probably get you back on when you've done some release of some of these new exciting sort of initiatives and innovation in the marketplace.
Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate being a part of the podcast. It's a lot of fun talking to you.
All right, cool. See you later.